Hello and welcome to Weekly MTG. I'm your host, Blake Rasmussen, but you are here today to talk to these two fine gentlemen who have done a ton of work on Phyrexia, All Will Be One. We're going to talk previews today. We're going to talk previews with one Adam Prosak and Corey Bowen. They're here to talk about the things you see at the bottom, the set booster exclusive previews, plus a handful of main set previews that tickled our fancy. So we're just going to talk previews. We'll do a little Q&A at the end for any questions you all might have for Adam or Corey. But before we get into that, Corey, let's talk a little bit about what you worked on the set, what your role was, etc., etc. Corey?
Hello, I'm Corey. I was the lead game designer for the one Commander decks, including the set booster exclusive cards, which we'll be looking at today.
Yeah.
And yeah, my name's Adam. I am a senior game designer here at Wizards of the Coast. And I was the set lead for the main set of Phyrexia All Will Be One.
Yeah, so we're going to start with Corey, mostly. Adam can chime in whenever he wants, of course. But Corey, you were the lead on these Commander set booster cards, correct?
Yeah, I had taken over for another lead,
Okay.
but for a good amount of time I was, helping design these and control them and putting them through our testing process.
All right. Well, let's jump right into it. Let's talk about some of these set booster collector cards, and we are going to start, of course, in Wooburg order because we do things in the right order here. We're going to start with Sky Hunter Strike Force. Sky Hunter Strike Force is a 2 and a white creature, Cat Knight, flying with melee and lieutenant as long as you control your commander. Other creatures you control have melee. It's a 2/2. Of note, before we start talking about these, we're going to show them all like this with the regular version on the left, the extended version on the right. The regular version on the left shows up in set boosters. The extended version on the right shows up in collector boosters. So, Corey, talk to us a little bit about this keyword soup.
Yeah, well, I love soup and I love keywords for individual reasons. But this has melee, it has lieutenant. These are two commander-oriented keywords from the past, from different sets. Thought it'd be cool to bring them together, to have a card that kind of combines those factors. That's also a theme we'll see a lot, is a lot of reprise keywords among these set booster cards, although these two are more showing the commander side. Kind of the intent of these cards is to be more oriented towards that format than others.
Okay. Yeah, so you mentioned that we are going to get a bunch of repurposed keywords on that. Was that intentional for these, or why did we revisit a bunch of keywords for these cards in particular?
Yeah, it was definitely intentional to do it. Phyrexia and the plane of Mirrodin and all the things it was and used to be and now has a lot of sets, a lot of history. It's fun to bring back some very resonant mechanics from those history. Kind of like remember this, remember that.
Yep.
Here's a different way we're doing this with modern design takes. Obviously, melee lieutenant do not show up in any Phyrexia or Mirrodin stuff. They're just cool to me, and I thought they fit quite well with the other variety of cards we have going on here.
All right. One card that does have one of those mechanics that we saw before is our next preview, which is called Mirage Mockery. This is 2 and a blue for a sorcery that says choose one. Create a token that's a copy of target artifact creature you control, or create a token that's a copy of target non-artifact creature you control, and then it has Entwine for 2 and a blue. Corey.
Yep, it's Entwine. It's a cool clone. What's not to love about cloning your artifact creatures or your regular creatures? I think this is pretty good. I mean, 6 mana for a double clone if you have the right board is pretty sweet. Always love to clone your Sad Robots or Solemn Simulacrums, whatever the name actually is. And
Solemn Simulacrums, yep.
That one. But yeah, this is mostly trying to get an Entwine design that feels really cool and appealing, and I think we certainly succeeded there.
Yeah. All right. Next up, Synthesis Pod. This is one of the coolest designs, and I know there's quite a bit of story around this. A lot of this is going to look just aesthetically familiar to a lot of longtime fans. So this looks very much like Birthing Pod. That's 3 and a blue Phyrexian mana in the cost. It's an artifact, and it has an activated ability for 1 and a blue Phyrexian mana and tap. And then it says exile a spell you control. So that's on the stack, correct?
Yes, much like Niv Magus, whatever. This exile spells right off the stack.
Okay. So target opponent reveals cards from the top of their library until they reveal a card with mana value equal to 1 plus the exiled spell's mana value. Exile that card, then that player shuffles. You may cast that exiled card without paying its mana cost. So obviously this is a pretty cool callback to Birthing Pod, but what's the story behind this card?
Yeah, I mean, at the very beginning of this card's life, it had a very simple name. It was called Blue Pod, which was a very clear set of rails, set of goals to achieve is what is Blue Pod.
Yeah.
And this card actually went through quite a lot of iterations. It was very important to us that we felt like Blue Pod, that we were sacrificing, in a sense, your spells to get different spells. Sometimes it was just instance and sorcery spells, sometimes it was some other stuff, but we came up with this iteration after a lot of playtesting with a new team we have in the studio. We have a casual play design team that does our CFL tests. This is a lot like our competitive play design team, but they focus more on not just Commander, but it's primarily Commander, 60-card formats, more casual-oriented stuff, but most of their time is put through looking at the Commander cards and testing the Commander cards more thoroughly than we have before. We're making more Commander cards than ever. 100-card decks that are singleton happen to be very inefficient to test over and over. So with a new devoted team that spends all their time thinking about the balance of these cards, this card went through the throes and ended up in this shape, which I think is quite cool. I think when I look at this card, I'm reminded of Chaos Wand and the like, and I'm a big fan of Chaos Wand, which is another spell or another artifact that lets you cast random spells from your opponents. So that's kind of where Synthesis Pod landed, a card that CFL told me needed to be more fun, and then we made it more fun, and here it is now.
Cool. So the CFL, and I'm not sure if I heard this or not, or if it was from when we were talking before the show.
Yeah.
This was the first set that they really started going?
Right. I remember them looking vaguely at Bro Commander, but this was the first set they were full throttle.
Right. They just formed and they worked on some of the Brothers War Commander stuff a little bit.
Okay.
But the team was fully formed and full power by the time got to Phyrexia.
And I had a lot of fun working with CFL. It was really, refreshing and eye-opening to spend a period of time, like a month or two or whatever, with this team, having meetings focusing just on how we can improve these cards with so much different feedback than we usually get. So it was a really blast for me as a typical Commander lead, and I really enjoyed working with them on future sets, and I'm really excited to continue working on them as they grow their philosophy.
Cool.
Yeah, huge add for me as well. Like I learned a lot about Commander and what balance looks like in a multiplayer casual environment like Commander. I just learned a ton from the team, just even from day one.
Cool. All right, well, let's look at our next preview card. This is called Monumental Corruption. So this is a black card that costs 3 and 2 black mana for a sorcery. Target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of artifacts you control. Corey.
Yeah, I mean, this is very simple, very sweet. I'm a big fan of black card draw spells. Fun fact, I'm also the black color pack counselor.
Okay.
So black card draw is basically all I live for. But I'm also a big fan of artifact strategies. And when we can make sweet mono black cards that play into artifact strategies, that makes me very happy. On these kind of designs particularly, it's, what is it? Or the X spell, that's XBB, our target player draws X and loses X. What I really like about this card is that you can target anyone. You can draw your own cards and lose your own life. But if you have enough artifacts, sometimes you can just defeat your opponent right there.
That's what
Targeting
I'm looking
them, who cares how many cards they draw? You're making them lose life, and that's what matters. So a big fan of the versatility in this and the very straightforward draw spell.
All right. Next up, we have... I did not catch the reference the first 8 times I looked at this card, but there's definitely a reference here. So this is Chiscoria Forged Tyrant, 6 and 3 red for a legendary creature dragon with affinity for artifacts. It's got flying, it's got haste. Whenever Chiscoria Forged Tyrant attacks, exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may cast an artifact spell from among them this turn. If you do, it has affinity for artifacts. It also happens to be a 5/4. Okay, A lot to unpack here, but Adam, you were talking before the show about the reference here.
Yeah. How long? Close to 20 years ago, original Mirrodin was released, and they had these two cards. They had the Tooth of Chiscoria and the Scale of Chiscoria.
Yeah, just powerhouses.
Yeah, they're actually. I actually played one of them in United States Nationals in, I'm gonna say, 2004.
Okay.
Sounds about the right time frame.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, super deep reference. Haven't seen this character in 20 some years.
Not even referenced, and here we are. Yeah, those cards were often 14th picks. They did make the cut because they were basically free and were artifacts and sort of did a thing. So this does a lot more, though, Corey.
That's true.
This does a lot more than its 3 mana Scale and it was a Tooth? Tooth and Scale. Sorry, I'm not as familiar with the Tooth and Scale Chiscoria. I'm making this card, designing this card with my other designers, and it is the crowd of other designers who say, hey, do you know what would be really cool? A Chiscoria card. It's a dragon, it's got a name, it's got 2 cards, and I'm like, yes.
Got something to do with affinity?
Let's make a giant, cool dragon from New Phyrexia. That seems amazing. It's got something to do with affinity, exactly. This dragon happens to have affinity. I also love affinity is very fun from the command zone on commanders. It can help pay your commander tax, which is very fun. I also think that anyone that runs this deck, I believe they're obligated to run his Tooth and Scale. I think if you're not running his Tooth and Scale in the 99 of a Chiscoria deck, you are a coward.
Shots fired.
Right.
I'm gonna disagree with Corey. You can play whatever Magic cards you want.
Well, you could rule 0 it so that you have they have super partner. That the Scale and the Tooth are in the command zone.
Hey, if you're playing against me,
they're pretty bad cards, so it's not going to cost much.
Anyways, it's a sweet dragon. It has affinity. It gives affinity for artifacts. It gives some random cards from your library affinity for artifacts. It's very cool.
Yeah.
Yep. Love it.
And a deep cut. Now, I did also see, and maybe Adam can speak more to this, Mark Rosewater mentioned in his blog that affinity was now deciduous, that we're going to be seeing it a little more often.
Yeah, I think a lot of keywords, and I think affinity for various things. This one has affinity for artifacts, which is the most famous thing to have affinity for. But you'll see in the main set, not during the show, but there are a couple cards with affinity for other things in the main set.
So affinity was in Mirrodin was kind of famously fairly broken.
True.
So I'm assuming the design team has learned a lot about how to cost things and the type of effects you can use with affinity.
Over the past 20 years or so, we've gotten a little bit better at cost reduction mechanics and stuff like that. But I think that the key to it is to not have these artifact lands.
Yeah.
That also reduce your help out with affinity.
Yeah.
And affinity for different things that you have to kind of invest more in.
Okay, so you're saying lands that tap for 2+ mana don't have a place in standard.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
That is. Yeah, write that one down.
Write it down. 2+ mana. All right, let's move on to the next card, which has another callback mechanic in it. So this is Tangle Weave Armor. So this is 2 green and a green for an artifact equipment with Living Weapon. Equipped creature gets +X/+X, where X is the greatest mana value among your commanders, and then it has equip 4. All right, Corey, a lot going on with this one as well, including, I think you said, a rule change?
Yes, there is a lot going on in Tangle Weave Armor. At its very core, this is looking at the main set, seeing for Mirrodin as a mechanic, and thinking to myself, what about Living Weapon? What happened to all of our cool living weapons? Wouldn't a green living weapon be a cool concept, even? And that's another callback mechanic, right? Living Weapon, the mechanic from the older sets. And then we have this ability, so it gets +X/+X, where X is the greatest mana value among your commanders. And I've messed around with this space before. In Strixhaven Commander, we had a card that scaled off of the greatest mana value among commanders you own in the battlefield or in your command zone. And then we also had in Midnight Set Booster cards, Midnight Hunt Set Booster cards, there was these flashback cards that cost less for the same scalar.
Right.
So this is actually a little bit of a technology change or rules change. This one doesn't care about what zone your commander's in. So your commander, usually it would scale off your commander if it was on the battlefield or in your command zone. And what we found was you would make your Tangle Armor, your commander would be in the command zone, it would have stats, and then you cast your commander, and while it's on the stack, it isn't on the battlefield.
It isn't in either of those zones, yeah.
It is in the command zone, and your germ would just die. It's a 0/0, it dies by itself.
Unless you target it with the scale of Chiscoria.
Unless you target with the
commander powerhouse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
the powerful scale of Chiscoria, the only thing that could survive its interaction. So that prompted us to take a closer look at this. I love making these cards, so I also wanted to get the technology a little bit more streamlined, the words a little bit easier to read. And so now the way this works, this doesn't care if your commander is on the battlefield, in your command zone, in exile, in your graveyard, on the stack, in your library even. This assumes that you remember the mana value of your commanders. And typically, we don't do a lot of this stuff because we care about memory and tracking. And if you can't see a card on your board, how are you supposed to track the stat of its mana value? But in commanders specifically, you build your whole deck around your commander. You're building 99 cards thinking about your commander. You're going to know its mana value. And with that assumption, I think we open up space to make some cool cards that scale off big commanders here.
Fair enough.
Corey, you should have made this colorless so that I could put it in my Kozilek deck.
True. I'm sorry, Adam.
Yeah, how dare you.
Yeah, it's my fault. I slighted you specifically.
All right, next up. Hey, speaking of your colorless deck, here's a card that it can go in there, although I wouldn't recommend it. It's Lux Artillery. So it is a 4-mana colorless artifact. Great. But then it has this ability, when you cast an artifact creature spell, also great for your Kozilek deck, it gains Sunburst.
Ooh, tough.
Less great. At the beginning of your end step, if there are 30 or more counters among artifacts and creatures you control, Lux Artillery deals 10 damage to each opponent. So Big Gun goes pew pew, Corey.
Yes, Big Gun goes pew pew. I think you've summed it up. But no, this does a lot for what it's worth. I think this could go in your colorless deck depending on the lands you run. They changed the rule a while ago, so you can actually produce mana of non-colorless types as long as you have the lands that produce mana of any color and the colored entity is right. Anyways, just saying. Sunburst mechanic from another old set, pretty fun. One odd thing, I think those who have been paying really close attention probably noticed that this says +1/+1 counter, a forbidden counter among Phyrexia all will be one.
+1/+1 counters?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Adam.
I don't know what you're talking about.
For the fans at home who
defied you.
actually don't know what they're talking about, we talked about it last week in that the main set has no +1/+1 counters because of the other counter shenanigans going on, oil counters. That's poison counters, that sort of deal. And so no +1/+1 counters in the main set, but you got to pass for these.
Yeah, Psych, I've defied Adam and all of his rules. Now, really, the no +1/+1 counters serves two purposes, right? One, there's an aesthetic purpose where, everything's poison, it's oil, it's different, it feels alien in some ways. The second is that it's confusing with oil counters, and it's a very big gameplay thing. But these cards are not meant to be drafted with the rest of All Will Be One set. And so there gives a little bit more leeway. And then really the tiebreaker is, can we print Sunburst on a card? Yeah. And Sunburst is cool enough that we said, yeah, let's do it anyways.
Cool.
So here we are, Sunburst card, cool card, destroys your opponents. That last ability, by the way, is another nicely massaged ability by our good friends in Casual Play Design.
Cool. All right, our final set booster commander card. This is one that leaked, but it's exciting, and a lot of people have been talking about it. This is Urtet, Remnant of Memnarch. 3 mana for a colorless legendary artifact creature mirror. It's a 2/2. Whenever you cast a mirror spell, create a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token. At the beginning of combat on your turn, untap each mirror you control. And then for 5 different colors of mana, tap, put 3 +1/+1 counters on each mirror you control, activate only during your turn. All right. Big legendary mirror here, Corey.
We did it! Yay! Yeah, I love Mirror. I love Mirror so much. Mirror are my best friends, and I was looking through the one set file, and Adam has disgraced me and fellow fans of the Mirror. There's like 3 maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact number, but there's definitely less than 5, and that was incorrect. So here's a cool mirror. It's a mirror commander. You can play all your mirror friends. You can do all the busted things or all the not busted things with Urtet, our favorite Remnarch. Remnants of Memnarch. Sorry, I combined those 2 words for some reason. No, this is a sweet card. You can do a lot of cool stuff with it. Love the little faces of these tiny little robots.
And I also want to call it, chat has picked up on this. So you'll see on the left that the normal version has a mythic symbol. The extended version on the right has a rare symbol. That is correct to how the cards are printed. So it will drop at a mythic rarity rate in set boosters. In collector boosters, the extended version will drop at a rare rate. Now, that was not obviously the intention, but that's the way the card ended up printed. There is going to be a statement also on Daily MTG, which has basically just what I said. But those rarities you see printed on the card are true to how the card is printed in the boosters.
Yeah, one more thing on Urtet, I just want to call it out. Typically, at least moving forward, Commander philosophy in general has started to shy away from or try not to do as many 5-color commanders that are maybe colorless or 1 card in the mana cost. And I understand that Urtet very directly says, like, no, this is like, it's literally shaped like Golos in a sense. It's colorless as the 5-color in the mana cost. That is something we're thinking about. I think with this card specifically, a few things were happening. One was, this is a mirror.
Yeah.
Mirrors are colorless, and they tap for mana, and they have all this stuff. And the shape was very befitting of a 5-color mirror. And you wanted to play all your Mana Dork mirrors, which had a bunch of color identities. So we knew we needed some 5-color thing.
Yeah.
And again, it just looked like a mirror. And the card is so specific.
Yes.
You just want to play mirror in the deck. You're not really playing good stuff 5-color. You're just playing a bunch of mirror and stuff. So there was a lot of factors where we thought that this was a pretty safe place to deploy that kind of shape. And it really fit aesthetically with the rest of the creature type and all the creatures in that type. I just want to, hey, we are thinking about that type of stuff. And we're being really smart on where we deploy 5-color stuff among our commander design stuff.
You know, my goal with this card is?
Yeah.
So in original Mirrodin, there are 5 mirrors. They're each cost 2 mana 1/1s, and they tap for this. Right? I want to get all 5 of them out.
Yeah.
Tap them for this ability, and then you can untap them with.
Yeah. And then you
with that ability.
Yeah. And so I actually very early in Phyrexia set design. This card was in the main set file, but then we decided that, there aren't enough mirrors. This is kind of like a trap. If you see this, you kind of expect other mirrors. So like, this is a really cool card. A legendary mirror should totally exist. How can we salvage this card? And then Corey stole it from me.
Stole it?
Yeah.
It sounded like you weren't using it, Adam.
You stole it?
That's what I tell my kids all the time. You can't be mad that you took it if you weren't using it.
Right.
That's kind of exactly what happened. So we're just like Blake's children now.
Yeah.
Adam was throwing away all his mirror, and I was scrounging from the trash, finding this golden child.
No, not that.
Something happened.
But it's a very cool card.
All right. Okay. That concludes our Set Booster exclusive section. Corey's still going to stay right here. He's got plenty to say. We are going to now switch over to some main set cards that we have to preview. Previews are coming to a close, and so we've got some cool stuff here to show, including we're going to kick it off with a cycle of common lands. So these are the 5 common spheres. I'm not going to read them all, but they all have sort of the same deal. They're all lands, spheres. They all enter the battlefield tapped. They all tap for their individual color of mana, and then for 1 and their color of mana, you can sacrifice them to draw a card. So, Adam, tell me about these in the set.
So the most obvious thing that jumps off the page here is their land type, spheres. So Phyrexia is a world with 9 layers of things, and we depicted them on 9 different lands, and they're the 9 spheres of Phyrexia. So you see 5 of them here, and then there are also 4 additional rares with the sphere type.
Okay.
And they don't have a lot of gameplay relevance.
Okay.
There's not like a Sphere Matters card or anything like that.
I seem to remember there are a couple cards that reference spheres.
There's I believe, exactly one.
Exactly one.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, these are 5 of the 9 spheres of Phyrexia, and for these are mostly designed for limited gameplay. A lot of big issues in limited, especially with the mechanics of the set, is that there weren't ways to kind of like mitigate drawing too few or too many lands, and so we added a bunch of different things. These are lands that help you from getting flooded later in the game. It's like, oh, I have too many lands, cash this in for a new card.
Yep.
They're pretty efficient at doing that relative to some other designs in this space.
Yeah, two manas on the lower end for sacrificing one of these. Yeah.
Yep. And so that's one of the ways, like, these are pretty strong. Highly recommend taking them quite early if you're worried about mana flooding.
All right. Next up, we were talking about this before we got on the show, totally unintentionally. Of the 5 cards we have to show off, we have a reprint, 3 cards that very strongly reference old Mirrodin cards, and then 1 card that you'll get it when we get there, but they were just cards that spoke to me, and that's because I'm old and I was around for all of this stuff. First up, an old favorite is returning. At Uncommon, it's Thrumming Bird. So Thrumming Bird is, if you aren't familiar, 1 and a blue for a 1/1 flyer. It's a creature Phyrexian bird horror. Great type line. And when Thrumming Bird deals combat damage to a player, proliferate. And then you've got that Ichor Showcase version in the center, and the Step and Complete foil. Note on some of the on all the Step and Complete foils we're going to show, the digital rendering of the foiling is not great and not there. So we are showing it for completeness sake, and so that you can see the number at the bottom. But in real life, it's a shiny foil Phyrexian symbols all over that. And we have a couple of versions of those online that you can see. But just note, that's not what the foiling looks like on those. Anyway, Thrumming Bird's back.
So one of the important people on the course of the Phyrexia set design team is Carmen Handy. She's great. She loves Phyrexia. It's her favorite place.
Yep.
And she did amazing work all throughout this. Like, all the cards, most of the cards we see here are just like very directly attributed to her work.
Okay.
And this is one of them. She was like, oh, this is exactly what this kind of our limited proliferate archetypes, kind of the shape of the card.
Yeah.
Not just use the original. This is a very beloved proliferate card. Probably my favorite proliferate card from original Scars.
Yeah.
There weren't very many of them, believe it or not.
Yep.
But like, I loved playing with this card, and it plays super well. It's at its best in like a blue-black, like kind of slow proliferate deck. You get it like a little poison, you kind of plink away, and you kind of slowly tick that up, either to get corrupted or even to actually get all.
Yeah, this kind of has like secret infect and Ali Eldrazi is in chat and noted that he top 8'd with this card actually.
Nice. I also had a really fun standard deck. I would proliferate like Tumble Magnets and Everflowing Chalice and Inkmoth Nexus poison counters.
Yep.
I'll note that this card is no stranger to Commander either.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Very cool, very versatile. Planeswalkers love it, as the art may not suggest.
Believe it or not, counters are all over Magic.
Counters
and
are
all
quite
over Phyrexia.
True.
All right, next up we have another blue card. So this is Unctus Grand Metatech. So for 1 blue, you get a legendary artifact creature, Phyrexian Vedalken. It's a 2/4. Other blue creatures you control have, whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card. Other artifact creatures you control get +1/+1. And then for a Phyrexian blue mana, until end of turn, target creature you control becomes a blue artifact in addition to its other colors and types, activate only as a sorcery, and then you've got those sweet variants on the right there. All right, Adam, what's going on with this card?
So, if you were around for original Skarzamirdan, this
I
is
was. I'm
a
old. Yeah.
this is a famously the Grand Architect, but now formerly a legendary creature. So we wanted to make a design that was a nod to that card and a lot of similar space. There's a Grand Architect here on the right. Loved playing with this card too. I actually played this and Thrumming Bird in the same deck.
I believe that.
Yeah. But this is really cool. Just kind of the whole like blue creatures get some ability, artifact creatures get another ability.
Yep.
And then this last ability kind of, makes them both blue and artifact.
Yeah. And those two cards actually work well together.
They do. So you can't. The Grand Architect is not legendary, but Unctus is in fact legendary. Now, and fun fact, or not fun fact, depending on your opinion of Phyrexian mana, this is one of just a handful of cards in the set with Phyrexian mana. Actually, there's 5 mythic rares and I believe 2 rares. With Phyrexian mana in their activations.
Right.
So there's just a little bit of Phyrexian mana, not a ton.
Just dip in when you're talking about broken mechanics. That's
that's the big reason. It is quite broken. There's also the only ones in the mana cost are the Planeswalkers.
Right. Exactly. All right. We have another. I don't want to call it a deep cut because this is a play off a card that saw quite a bit of tournament play actually back in the day. And this card looks strong as well. It is Rhea Ivor, Bane of Bladehold. So for 2, a white, and a black, you get a 3/4 legendary creature, Phyrexian Knight. It has Battle Cry.
Sure does.
Battle Cry. At the beginning of combat on your turn, the next time target creature would deal combat damage to 1 or more players this combat, prevent that damage. If damage is prevented this way, create that many 1/1 colorless Phyrexian Might artifact creature tokens with Toxic 1, and this creature can't block. All right, Adam, what's going on here?
All right, so this was cool. We're at some point you kind of take a look at the suite of legendary characters, figure out who and what colors they are, and Carmen, she's gonna come up a lot. It was like, what if this is just the hero of Bladehold? We kind of had this design before we had the character, and so like, yeah, that's a great fit. Oh, how do we make it obvious? Because Hero of Bladehold is not a legendary creature,
right?
It's like, I know, Battle Cry, that'll do it.
Battle Cry.
So Battle Cry does a couple things here. One, it gets ridiculous once you've activated used the second ability of making a bunch of might tokens. It both increases the number of might tokens you get and makes those mights more potent. But yeah, just giving kind of, I call it might link instead of life link. So you make that many mights when you deal that much damage.
Got the same stats, 4 mana, 3/4.
That is true. In fact, the casual play design team, as we alluded to, they actually liked this stat line. This is not this initial stats, like it's like a kind of cheaper, smaller thing at first, and they're like, what if I think this is 4 mana, 3/4, same stats is actually the most fun. So I'm like, okay, that sounds awesome.
I remember seeing the casual play design team play with this card a lot.
They absolutely did.
The most fun shape for it.
And you would see, like, you go over see their battlefields, and it's just like a row of mites, like 10, 15 deep or whatever. This is very, very cool, very explosive. In a lot of situations.
Cool.
But yeah, in terms of keywords that we haven't seen, I think you'll see that a little bit more often going forward. Battle Cry is like, this is the only card in the set with Battle Cry. But that's okay because it made a lot of sense here. So when it makes sense, we'll deploy old keyword or keywords not in the set on just a handful of cards.
Okay. All right. Next up, mechanically has some callbacks, but really it's just another version of a legend. It's version 2.0 of Thrun, formerly the Last Troll, now the Breaker of Silence. So it is 3 green and green for a 5/5 legendary creature, Troll Shaman. This spell can't be countered. It has trample. Thron, Breaker of Silence can't be the target of non-green spells your opponents control or abilities from non-green sources your opponents control. And as long as it's your turn, Thrun has Indestructible. Adam, we brought back Thrun.
We did. So unlike the previous card, Rhea of War, this one was character first. Like, we knew we wanted to bring Thrun back. We wanted to make the last troll basically a lie. It's not the last troll. There'll be plenty of additional trolls. But yeah, Thrun's character is very like, I am super hard to kill, interact with.
Yep.
Things like that. So it's like, you know, the whole can't be countered, I'll call it hexproof from non-green, but you have to target with a green thing. It can be a multicolor green thing.
Yep.
So you can Assassin's Trophy or Maelstrom Pulse or, you know, whatever your multicolor green thing is.
It's still vulnerable to mass removal, which is typically sorcery speed.
Yep. There are ways to. It's got weaknesses or whatever, but it is a lot of its strength is in being like super hard to deal with by most conventional means.
Yep. All right. And then finally, we had to end on this one. It only makes sense. Our final preview card for the day is called All Will Be One. We said
that's the name of the set.
That's the name of the set. We said the thing. We made the card. It is All Will Be One. It is a red enchantment for 3 red and a red. Whenever you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, All Will Be One deals that much damage to target opponent, creature an opponent controls, or planeswalker an opponent controls. And you've got that sweet, sweet art showing Elish Norn in the middle there. All right, what's going on with this card, Adam?
This is just this is one of my favorite cards in this set. I really love this design. I love being able to like do something with all of your counters. This feels super red to me, but also very engine-y.
Yep.
Which I always have. Like for me, like I would play this with like a bunch of like charge counters and little oil counters with artifacts. That's where it's really potent within the context of this set.
Proliferate.
Proliferating is like, oh, I'm going to deal a bunch of damage whenever I proliferate. But the real kicker is this is really strong with planeswalkers. You just play a planeswalker. If it enters with 4 loyalty, I'm just going to deal 4 to something. So
whenever you use a plus loyalty ability, it triggers. Okay.
And so that's where a lot of things, and I think that's a really I fought for that ability to stay because I think it is super cool and super aspirational. And as you can see with some other cards in the set, like there are some very cool Planeswalker-related cards. In the set because there are 10 of them. That's a lot more than normal. So I felt like some of these cards that really keyed off Planeswalkers would do a lot. So
makes sense.
Through my head, I'm just thinking of all like the green cards that double counters. Like Colonian Hydra and some other cards. So that's what I'll be doing.
Yeah. No, there are a lot of green cards that just add counters on your upkeep or at the beginning of combat or when you do a thing. Yeah.
I'm not talking add counters. I'm doubling counters.
You're doubling only doubling
big.
counters.
I'll play with your Sunburst.
Sunburst
card.
Sunburst,
that sounds really fun.
That's a good one.
Go. All right. Those are all the previews we have today. We do have about 20 minutes left with Adam and Corey. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in chat. It's going to be easier for me to see them if you start with @Magic. And we will go from there. So let's see. I got this question last week. You can say yes or no, Adam. Will there be any new two Pioneer reprints that have not been revealed yet in this set?
That's tough. I'm pretty sure. Have we revealed the lands?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So the Allied Fast lands.
Yep.
That Pioneer was a really big consideration for those lands to be in this set.
Yeah.
Kind of wanted to make, when we started Pioneer, there was a kind of imbalance among
the lands,
allied mana bases and any mana bases. We're strangely, the enemy mana bases were stronger because they were trying to correct our previous imbalances. But now we're trying to, with the fast lands, ally fast lands to Pioneer, trying to make it closer to, even. And I think the fast lands are the strongest, maybe even the strongest dual lands in Pioneer.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a big, big shift in terms of what you can do with your allied color decks.
All right. So where are the battle cards? So for those who don't know, Traxa, a card that was previously revealed, talks about different types of cards, and in there there's a little says battle as a card type. It's a thing. They're not in this set. They're not in this set. We'll see. All right. Next question. Okay, I did see this a couple times, and you two are not on the rules team, so they may or may not be able to answer this, but we'll throw it out there. You guys might know the answer. Rhea, and there are a couple of other cards that say this too, says the next time target creature deals combat damage to one or more players, how does one creature deal combat damage to more than one player?
Yeah, it's Hydra Omnivore, right? There's some cards like Hydra Omnivore that when it deals damage, I don't know if it's a trigger. I think it's not a trigger. It might be a trigger.
Yeah. So when it deals combat damage to a player, then it deals the combat damage to all the players.
That's not a trigger though, right?
I don't have any specific card examples.
Yeah.
But it is possible. So the rules team is really good at coming up with like these corner cases. Where there needs to be an answer, and this is a really good case of like there needs to be an answer. And like as a designer, I'm like, comes up so infrequently. I don't care what the answer is.
Yeah.
Really, like if you want to do your cool thing, sure. And so I'm on the side of, okay, let them have, like if you do this really weird thing of like dealing combat damage to multiple players, okay, yeah, you get your tokens. But it's not, the question is correct, and like that seems really hard to do. It is.
Okay.
It's just there needs to be an answer for some rules corners cases.
Right.
Fair enough.
Just in case you can do it, or you can ever do it sometime in the future.
Yeah. All right. The Monument to Perfection card speaks about Sphere, Basic, but also Locus. Are there any Locus in this set?
There are not.
Okay.
So it's one of those things bringing like kind of the errors, different Mirrodin errors. So like the Locus are from original Mirrodin, like Cloud Post, and then Scars of Mirrodin has a Glimmer Post, and so on and so forth. So like, oh, can you get this? Yeah, why not? A cool thing to, without adding an additional Locus to the set. There are the spheres here. It's like, oh, that's a cool callback.
Yeah.
It's a fun little Easter egg with some functional relevance to someone somewhere.
Yep. Okay, next up. All right, here's a question. I'm going to stick to set-specific questions for the moment. I do see the question about our website and content no longer being available. I am going to. It's a totally fine question that I could talk about, but we're going to try to stick to, since this is a Phyrexia all be one stream, we're going to try to stick to those things. You guys aren't lore. How much of the lore of the set do you know?
I'll answer if I know.
All right. Was Realmbreaker completed? Sorry, completed early due to Nissa's involvement.
Sounds like a.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, don't know is fine. Is there a list of employees attending? I think they mean Magic Fest Philly. Want to get some signatures? There's not a public list. I'll be there. Are you guys going to Philly?
I am not.
I'm not.
Not. Okay. I am. I'm doing a panel.
Ooh,
we're actually doing this show on Sunday. We're doing the first look at March of the Machine. Yeah. Let's see. Yep, the one or more. We answered that. A lot of people were interested in the one or more.
It is very weird.
It is very weird. People noticed it.
Yeah.
We saw some of the comments on social media about it. But yeah, the answer is just it can happen, and so might as well plan for it. I noticed no Phyrexian. what I think they're. I'm going to ask what I think this question is getting towards. I noticed no Phyrexian like Lord or something that cared about the Phyrexian creature type in this set.
Yeah.
Can we look forward to something like that in the near future?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and not something we brought up. Like a huge percentage of the creatures in the set, like I want to say more than 70%, are Phyrexian.
Yep.
And so to have a Lord or a Phyrexian matters thing, that is really close to saying creatures matter.
Yeah.
In the context of this set, so we avoided specifically any sort of Phyrexian creature type matters in this set.
Okay. That makes sense. It would be like if we went to Elf World and most of the creatures were elves, and then we made an elf lord,
We had a similar thing we had to really with Eldraine. We had humans and non-humans.
Yep.
Where like non-humans was like so close to like creatures.
Yeah.
We had to up the number of humans to make it a number, but we didn't want to here. This is the Phyrexian homeworld.
Yep.
It was important for us to have so many Phyrexians here, so we decided to make them not mechanically matter.
Yep.
So many of the rebels are expressed through equipment spells too.
Right.
So you end up with literally most creature spells are Phyrexians.
Yeah, most creatures that aren't tokens that come with an equipment.
Exactly.
Yep. All right, let's see. I've seen a couple questions about this. You can answer yes or no for this set specifically. Are we going to be seeing a new version of Skithiryx at some point?
There is not a Skithiryx in this set.
Okay. Some of these questions are doubled. When are we going to find out what the battle card type looks like? Eventually.
Or not.
One day.
One day. I mean, we got contraptions, so like we'll get to it eventually. Are there going to be any cards that remove poison counters in this set?
No. So, Mark Rosewater is a very big proponent of this, and I 1000% agree with him. It is really important when you have different zones or different types of things to differentiate that between them mechanically. And so, if you could remove poison counters, poison would just feel like a second life total. So I'm like, we think that it's not important, but like not being able to undo the poison is a really big part of like the dread of Phyrexia is coming for you. And it also makes it very distinct from a second life total. So I think it is very important not to be able to undo poison counters. Like there's like a Homelands card, I think.
Leeches.
Yeah, it's
Leeches,
like, just like very famous for just like this is not what poison should do. This is should not be part of the Magic, but it is.
That's what leeches do in the Magic multiverse. They remove poison, apparently.
They do on Earth as well.
Yeah. All right. Will there be an organized play stream as an update to the one you did with Billy Jensen last year? Yeah, actually, Billy Jensen is going to be on the show on February 7th. We're going to talk about some stuff, and we'll talk a little bit about Philly and a couple of play updates there. So yeah, February 7th.
2 weeks from now.
That's like 2 weeks from now. So yeah, we have a couple exciting. We have, I would say, three pretty. I mean, all our shows are great, but we have some exciting shows coming up. All of our shows are great.
All of your shows will be one.
Every single.
All right. Given his appearance in the story with a new design, I was surprised at the lack of a new Tybalt card. Was there ever a plan for him to appear in the set?
I think by the time I started working on the set, we knew the 10 Planeswalker characters. I can't really speak to all of our world building and story teams do a lot of work way ahead of that, but pretty early on from my standpoint, maybe not from their standpoint, the 10 Planeswalkers were locked in, at least their characters.
Okay, ahead of time. So that's more question for the story side.
Yeah.
All right. I think Rosewater's talked a little bit about this in his articles, but I'll ask you for your take on it. Were there any other considerations for Toxic that had different variations in comparison to Infect or any of the other poison mechanics that have been around?
Yeah, love talking about Toxic. So Vision Design tests a lot of different things. It's like one of the core tenets, and Mark Rosewater has talked about it in this article if you want to go more in depth. But one of the core tenets of returning to Phyrexia is we want to do poison counters in some way.
Yes.
How do we do that? Like, Infect was kind of all or nothing, where it's like they don't deal regular damage. That's a really big strike for like them working with your regular creatures. And do we want to do it mostly through creatures? And yes, that's probably dealing combat damage is the most fun way to get poison counters. Although we did add some other ways to give somebody a poison counters. I believe a card got previewed. It's like a fight spell that gives your opponent a poison counter, that sort of thing. But yeah, in terms of that, the Vision Design team landed on Poisonous, and we just changed it to Toxic, just slightly for like digital reasons. Like Poisonous appears on 2 cards in Future Sight. That's it. And is a triggered ability. So it's like I deal you 1 damage and then trigger, then you get a poison counter.
Yeah.
Just clean that up. You get it all at once. Fewer clicks on, our digital platforms, and just generally cleaner gameplay. So we ended up liking Poisonous a lot.
Yeah.
And just cleaned it up a little bit, and now you have Toxic.
Cool. I think you mentioned this earlier, but are we going to see all 9 spheres in the set?
Yes, there are 9 spheres in the set. We previewed the 5 common lands, and those are 1 of each color. And then there are 4 rares that are colorless. They're not aligned with any particular color. And they all have the sphere types, and they're all at rare.
All right. Corey, I don't know how much you can speak to this, but I'll throw it out there. Has there been consideration, conversation, etc., of upping the amount of poison counters needed to end a game in Commander with the rules committee?
I mean, yeah. Very early on, we talked about that. I think poison in Commander, from the starting place, it was a conversation. What was going to happen here? What do we need to do to make a pre-constructed deck that worked with poison, that didn't feel as scary or as antagonistic as usual? And so we put a lot of work into that. Very early on, I was suggesting to people that we just change poison to half your life total, and then we just make that the rule across the board. And early on in the pre-con process, there was a different commander lead, Ariadnia. She was working on those decks. And I believe that we ended up talking to the rules committee a little bit, having a conversation, or we just had a conversation with our philosophy, like our commander group in general, who holds the philosophy. And I think we ended up, at a starting point, we wanted to build the deck with status quo. Like, let's build our poison commander deck and see how it flies under status quo. And because a rules change it didn't seem super warranted. That the types of things that people were killing the opponents quickly in Commander with poison were more like, surprise, I infect you with my giant creature. Yeah. And if we changed it, people are just going to have bigger creatures and do the same thing. Yeah. Whittling someone down to 10 poison felt like an okay speed at the right power level. Okay. And the deck that we have doesn't really motivate you to kind of kill your opponents as quickly as possible. It motivates you to gain a lot of value by corrupting them very early, and even then changing the poison to 20 counters would almost make the poison completely irrelevant. If I'm hitting my poison with 20 damage, or if I'm hitting my opponent with 20 damage, I'm hitting them with 20 damage, right? Yeah. They're already going to be so low. And obviously, I think a lot of people bring up the threshold of 15 as well. But even then, that felt like too small of a change. So there was a lot of conversations, a lot of considerations, a lot of factors. The best world that we can live in is that there's no rules changes and all the execution of the poison cards makes sense. And I think we entered that world where there are no rules changes and all of the executions of the cards and the play patterns, they make sense. They feel like Poison. They feel like you're playing Phyrexia. Everything is good. So I'm quite happy with where we landed, but we did consider everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I have my own story here. Like early on, and said when I took over, I was like, oh wow, we're adding like a lot of Poison cards to Commander, which like I think one of the things that holds it back is like there just aren't that many cards with Poison that get Poison counters. Commander. So I'm like, I kind of moved in as like, oh, we're totally gonna have to change something. But as we played, we felt like a lot of cards we were adding add finite amount of counters.
Yeah.
So Toxic doesn't scale with your your pump spells,
Right.
or it's hard to be like add Toxic or add Poison, scale your Poison all that well. It's just like nope, you scale the size of your creature.
Yeah.
But you still deal 2 Toxic or 3 Toxic or 1 Toxic. And so as we kept playing, it was like no, 10 is correct. But yeah, I absolutely had the conversation, and I actually went into the whole process thinking that we would.
Okay.
And over time, it became pretty obvious that we didn't.
Okay.
And that might change, like if there's a lot of infect cards from Scarlet. If those started getting more popular in Commander, we'll react.
Yeah.
Like that. And I think that's the stance of the Commander Rules Committee as well.
As a reminder, like we don't control all of the rules for Commander, right?
Yeah.
So it kind of has to be a conversation of the Rules Committee, which it was.
Yeah.
But again, I think we landed. I also, like Adam, early on, I was a little like I knew we had to do Poison for Commander. I was skeptical. I thought it was going to change, and then just playing it proved us wrong.
All right.
It was like, nope, this is actually fun and cool, and corrupting is actually fun and cool.
Okay. All right. Last question we have time for. You managed to fit a lot of callback legendary creatures in this set. We previewed some of them. Were there any you would have liked to include that ultimately didn't make the cut?
The short answer to that is no. The long answer is like the cast of legendary characters is kind of. There are enough legendary characters that we can kind of fit in the things that we want to fit. So between the world building teams, like you need to have this character, they're a big part of the story. And the design side, like, Carmen's like, ooh, it'd be really cool if this black white character was a hero blade hold.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. We had plenty of space to make it. And every once in a while, sets can be like, ooh, we want so many characters, but they're all the same color. Like, for example, all the vampires in Innistrad Crimson Vow wanted to be like black and red, and we had to figure out how to, make a wide variety of legendary characters. But for Phyrexia, the cards that we wanted were all pretty color balanced.
Okay.
And so a lot of it was like, there's just a couple, fill in here, here and there, and there's like, the world building team wanted to Phyrexianize a couple of like other famous legendary characters, and it was like, oh, they all happen to work out.
Yeah.
In this set, so it was relatively smooth in terms of figuring out the suite of legendary characters.
Great. Did you have any?
No,
Cool.
When I saw gaps, we made Chiscoria and Urtet, so
All right, and then I will answer this last question I saw in chat because it's related. There will be a Legends of New Phyrexia article. I forget the timing off the top of my head, but sometimes Stibbs is in chat, and I know he knows what the date is, but it is coming. Okay, that is all the time that we have. I'm sorry to everyone whose question we didn't get to. I tried to keep them limited to this set, but there were a bunch of great questions that we unfortunately didn't have time for. Coming up, we have some pretty cool shows. So next week, as per usual, we will be opening packs of Phyrexia All Will Be One, so you can get a look at what's in the different types of boosters. No, because I do have a guest on that show already.
Oh, sweet.
Remoting in from wherever he'll be will be Matthew Lillard to come on and talk more about the latest from Beatles and Grimm.
Oh, that's sweet.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah,
so
I understand.
yeah.
I love Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, Matthew's been on the show once before, and it
cool.
was great. But he'll be coming in remotely this next time. The week after that, as I said earlier, Billy Jensen will be on the show to talk more about play, about a couple small changes that are being made, about the upcoming Pro Tour in Philadelphia, which is exciting. That's our first return to tabletop Pro Tour. We had Worlds, but this is a bigger event, and really excited for that in Philadelphia. So we're going to do that on February 7th. The next week, we will not have a show on Tuesday. Instead, we're doing a show at Philadelphia, where we will do the first look for March of the Machine. So that'll be on the 19th. That will be live in Philadelphia, but we will also tape it and put it up on YouTube afterwards. And then more cool stuff coming after that. But you know what? 3 weeks is a pretty good run. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Corey, for staying with us and answering all the questions for our fans. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
See you.